half of the American people clearly state in poll after poll that UFOs are behind ETs are behind the UFO that they're being seen in the sky. Some of them, meaning there's an ET presence. Half, 80 to 90% are consistently saying the government's lying about this. The government's position is still there's nothing to it. There's nothing at all. All right. So you have this huge disparity, right, between the citizens' view and the government's position. You've got contact going on possibly with an untold number of individuals. The things are being seen all over the place, right? And so we're in this rather extraordinary position that is yet to be resolved. And then underneath all of that, a growing number of mostly retired, some active military and civilian agency, government agency people, less constrained because of their position and the fact that this is the 21st century and it's not 1950 anymore, are starting to talk. They're starting to write books, they're starting to come public and talk, they're starting to talk to researchers in private, they're going in front of cameras, they're holding news conferences, and they're basically talking about what they saw, what they did, what they heard. And of course, and all of what they saw, did, and heard is supporting what the researchers had pretty much established as an extraterrestrial presence. The government knows about it, the government has embargoed it. Now, some of these individuals are high-level people, like astronauts and generals, admirals, captains and commanders, experienced military pilots, air traffic controllers. Some of them are intelligence officers. And then you've got NASA people and so forth. I mean, it's really quite extraordinary. And the media at the highest end, right, the very condensed corporate media at the highest end, which somehow, either wittingly or unwittingly, is utterly complicit in maintaining this embargo. And I'm talking about the networks, I'm talking about Dan Rather, Brokaw, and Jennings. Jennings recently did a documentary with some merit. I'm talking about Koppel, I'm talking about Schultzberg, I'm talking about Kay Graham, I'm talking about the Post and the LA Times and the New York Times. They are utterly complicit in helping to maintain this embargo, because essentially there is virtually almost nothing that could happen that the paper would say, oh, that's a story. There is no person of rank, virtually. Now, high enough they would probably have to react, but overall they have stood down. And they've said it is in our best interest, for whatever reason, that we do not make this a story. And so the greatest news story of all time has sat uncovered for 57 years, while the most powerful journalists in America have done nothing about it of any consequence. And believe me, they've been approached over and over and over again in every way possible. And their basic response has always been either nothing or go away. Though they do take the information, and they are being informed. So we have a very awkward political situation that has to be resolved for a host of reasons. Not the least of which, and this is why the work is very compelling, the work of, again, exopolitics, the politics of disclosure, and the political resolution is so compelling, is that it is ever clear, on a day-by-day basis, ever clear to most intelligent people that the human race has reached a critical time wherein its failings and limitations are positioned to do grave damage. It's always been bad behavior and plenty of outrageous activity on the part of human beings, but most of it in the past has been relatively confined and not able to do great damage. So it was awful and exciting to read about in history, but overall it was like, yeah, the Earth moved on. No longer. On about 3 or 4 different fronts, we finally reached our Peter Principle, or the wall, or the end of the box canyon, all right? We've populated to 6 billion, and the planet just really can't support it. We're heading to 9 billion in approximately 35 years. 9 billion is just a number that is unfathomable, and it could have been worse. We have stressed the environment to the limit. We're melting the polar caps because we're adding heating on top of natural heating process. We've stuck holes in the ozone. We've fished out the oceans. We're creating massive pollution. We're reducing oxygen levels worldwide, sometimes as low as 5 and 6% in certain cities. We're creating emerging diseases. We have a massive cancer epidemic worldwide. that is eventually going to reach 50% of all people will have cancer. And of course, the lack of the inability to feed and house and clothe the human race, particularly children, is producing horrific numbers. The most famous one, the one that's being heard more and more, is that depending upon the weather conditions in a given time, between 20 and 30,000 children, it means humans under the age of 16, simply die every day, every single day. 20 to 30,000 a day, all right, die, because either they don't have enough food or they have diseases that are related to their malnutrition or exposure to the elements. This is an unbelievable number. Now, if I were an extraterrestrial, looking at the Earth objectively, much in the way that a society or a local neighborhood society would view objectively a family. Imagine a family of 10 children where the husband and the wife, legally I might add, spend virtually all of the money in the family on guns, gun publications, joining membership in gun clubs, going on hunting trips and whatever, and do not spend any money on food, so that the children, maybe 4 or 5 of the 10 children, starve to death because they just don't feed them. They spend all the money on weapons, which is their hobby. What will we do? Well, we'd take the children, the remaining children, away from this couple. We would then try the couple in a court of law and send them to prison. Well, from an extraterrestrial point of view, that's exactly what would happen to the human race. Our children should be taken away from us, and we should all be tried in some sort of galactic court of law. We don't take care of our children because they die every day because we don't have enough food. Oh, we could technically have enough. So all of this disease and suffering is generating political upheaval and terrorism and radical groups fighting for territory, fighting for acknowledgement. And these groups are creating massive social upheaval. Meanwhile, we have refused to deal with the consequences of our technology. And so 14 years after the end of the Cold War, there are 20,000 nukes out there, an untold number of unknown nukes, including mini nukes and suitcase nukes, and biological properties and entities and laboratories, none of which has really been truly secured in a way to absolutely ensure it would never get in the improper hands. And so now, as our own governments admit, we are on the verge of some major asymmetric events where terrorists are going to nuke cities, they're going to create massive biological havoc. This is insanity, all right? This is insanity, but this is the 21st century that we're headed for. An overpopulated world of massively degrading environment in which the worst of our technologies are in the hands of even small groups run by fanatics. And overall, we're not even beginning to deal with it. About the best we can say is that we're starting a program in which we hope we can kill off all the people we feel are a threat. But in fact, the political, environmental, and social circumstances are generating such terrorism and terrorists and other disaffection at a great many times more than we can possibly eliminate through old paradigm methodologies. And so the 21st century is poised to be a first-rate, grade A, prime, consummate catastrophe. And as we begin this century, we have a situation in which there is a massive hole in the worldview of the human race. There is no global formal acknowledgement of the fact that not only is the human race not alone, it lives in a galaxy that is teeming with life, multiple civilizations, and many of those civilizations are already engaging the planet. And so the perspective of people is insufficient. It is inadequate. It's incomplete. And they're unable to view the planet in the proper perspective. They can't see themselves as a species. They can't see the planet as a highly prized, unique, and special place. They can't see the wisdom of shepherding this planet. They can't see the wisdom of getting along in sufficient quantities to get along. And that's understandable, right? War after war after war has been fought in the 10,000 years since the rise of summer, post biblical, post the catastrophe we know about 12,000 years ago, primarily by feeding a sufficient number of lies to a populace of one sort or another, so that they would, under this misapprehension, go out and kill somebody for some reason. I mean, we've been doing it over and over again. When you don't have the proper understanding of the truth, if you don't understand the world as it is, then you are easily duped into whatever nonsense venal leaders will do. And we're in that same position. And it gets even worse, because there is a mounting evidence base that in the black ops dark world that is the basement of what I call the secret empire, which is the intelligence wing of the military-industrial complex, meaning the totality of all of the classified programs, people, and documents, all of the agencies, intelligence agencies, and all of the classified segments of the major government contractors, which are vast. That's the secret empire. It's vast. It's bigger than the Roman Empire. And in its basement, there are things going on which we cannot even fathom. All we get are little hints on occasion, right? A vast underground world, literally underground world, in which programs, experimentation, and even policies are being conducted. And there is some sense that a military position and potential aggressive position with respect to these extraterrestrial entities is being created. Now, is it right or wrong? We don't know. Is there oversight of this? Not even close. And so, essentially, we have an evolving, right, exopolitical reality being created literally in secret, with entities that are not even acknowledged, at the beginning of a century that poses dramatic and draconian problems for the planet itself and for the human race. This is completely cockamamie. No sane political scientist, no sane analyst, policymaker whose goals are essentially good, or at least in consonance with the fundamental policies that were embedded in our Constitution and in our founding documents, would support this thing, this construct that we have. And yet that's what we got. And so it turns out that the extraterrestrial issue is a door into, hopefully, the political resolution, not only of the reform of the secret empire, but the end of this truth embargo and the opening up of critical important knowledge to the human race at a time they have got to have as much information as they can. I think the world literally is at risk here. I think that the Constitutional Republic of the United States is at risk here. And what needs to happen is the political movement, the number of people involved, the amount of money being put into the structures to pursue these issues has got to become appropriate to the importance of the issue, and we are not there yet. My job is to help us get there. I'm involved in the political resolution of what we now call, I prefer to call the truth embargo that the government imposed on the facts regarding an extraterrestrial presence. That presence has been established, I think, many times over by the citizen science research that's been going on since the 40s. The government did studies, but they were primarily for show. And the issue, from a government standpoint, has been managed very intensely since '47, at minimum. Managed in the sense that the government was going to deal with it, but deal with it within the national security structure, and never acknowledge that there's anything to this. But in fact, there is. I mean, we are being engaged as a planet and as a species by other beings, possibly multiple species. This has just been proven beyond any doubt at all. Anyone who reads the research who isn't compromised by being either an idiot or in the employ of the government management of the issue can only arrive at one conclusion. The evidence is overwhelming. Videotape, daylight discs, nighttime discs, photographs, direct pilot sightings by the thousands, millions of sightings around the world, direct testimony from direct government involvement, and of course you've got an entire contactee body of evidence that's now in the tens of thousands of reports from everyone from the person that works the cashier desk at Denny's to doctors, lawyers, and members of the military. Detailed reports of sometimes coerced contact. So the fact is that after 58 years since the Roswell event in July of '47, we're in this strange reality, which we're caught between two worlds, between two paradigms. And the bridge between, or the door between these two paradigms is what is now called the disclosure event. When I got into this field in 1996, to specifically get into the political issues, we were just, the terminologies were just emerging. I called it at first the politics of UFOs. I came, though, very quickly to dislike that acronym terribly. And I just assumed that the UFO acronym would go away forever. Eventually that became the politics of disclosure, and the process underway, the disclosure process. And where things are now is that a new term is emerging called exopolitics. Exopolitics would be the sum total of social and political implications regarding the engagement by the human race of extraterrestrial related phenomena and extraterrestrial beings. It's a broad term covering an enormous amount, and it will eventually be the term, I believe, that will describe it. It was initially started, or the impetus was given by Alfred Weber, a Jewish doctor from Yale who was a futurist working for Stanford Research Institute, and then Dr. Michael Salla, whose degree I believe is from the University of Melbourne, if I'm not mistaken. He has given a lot of support to this concept, and so have I, and others are starting to get on board. And then the other thing that's going on is that the disclosure process is close to becoming the disclosure movement. And by that I mean a true political movement in which very large numbers of people are, in any number of ways, using their rights as First Amendment rights, their right of petition, to demand from the government that this very strange situation be rectified by the disclosure event. Now, the disclosure event is a very defined term. It is the prize of this political movement, this incipient political movement, just as the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act were the prize of the Civil Rights Movement in the 50s and 60s. The disclosure event is this and this only. It is the formal acknowledgement of this extraterrestrial presence by the governments of the world, probably starting with the United States government. That's it. Everything else, who they are, what they are, where they're from, how they got here, what their intentions are, what involvement have we had behind the scenes, what vehicles have crashed, what reverse engineering has been done, what treaties have been signed, and a million other things. All of that is post-disclosure. And that will be an informational battle that'll go on between the citizens' interest and the government's interest. And there will be endless and, well, there will be what will seem like indeterminable battles over the truth. But that process will be tripped by the disclosure event. And what is going to happen next, I think, is that there is going to be a political movement in which the public is going to demand that this take place. And they will use all means possible. And I'm trying to be part of this. I've approached the political the process from every angle that was appropriate. And what I mean by that is that one thing was clear, that this issue needed to be normalized. Why? The government's primary methodology for keeping a non-secret under control for 58 years, which they did brilliantly, I might add, using all of the tools that they honed during the Cold War. which is to say that the CIA and the National Security Act and the NSA and the expansion of many other intelligence agencies and all of the presidential directives, all of the stuff that was done was created during that period to deal with the Cold War and the Soviet Union, had a dual purpose. It was also being used with respect to the extraterrestrial phenomena issue, which I think many in government felt was just as significant and a concern as the Soviet Union. And they had both things to deal with, and it was a difficult problem. Had I been in a high-level position in 1947 and confronted with the decision what to do about this recently emerging situation regarding ETs, regarding crash vehicles, and all that might imply, at the time that I'm learning that the Soviets have got their own missiles, their own German scientists, their own nuclear development program, and that we have an ideological divide that seems certainly unbreachable, that they've divided Europe, as Churchill said, with an iron curtain. I would have incorporated into the national security structure too, right? Which is why I try not to refer to it as a cover-up. First of all, I don't like UFO, the acronym, and the cover-up is not the proper term, so I definitely don't like the phrase UFO cover-up, though I will occasionally use it. Why? Because cover-up implies that there has been an effort to conceal fundamentally illegal activity. And I do not believe that the suppression of the extraterrestrial reality from the American people and the world's people in the 40s, 50s, and 60s was illegal. Now, as it happens, some illegal things were done, I think, to serve that fundamental goal. But that doesn't mean that the fundamental policy was illegal. And so it wasn't a cover-up, it was an embargo for national security purposes. And what happened is that over time, the wisdom, the justification for the embargo began to erode. And the benefits of the truth began to increase. And so you just sort of had this transition from a clearly defined policy that was justified in the 40s until the 50s and the 60s. Of course, in the 60s you had plenty of trouble. I mean, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis. We had the Vietnam War. We're conducting warfare right near the Chinese border. Not exactly a decade conducive to introducing dramatic new information. We were still in a very precarious position. But as you move into the late 70s and the 80s, it starts to become more and more difficult to justify the embargo. And when the Cold War ends in 91, formally ends with the dismantlement of the Soviet republics to their respective republics, or the Soviet Union to its respective republics, then the justification really erodes. There are a number of individuals and groups that are trying to pursue the resolution of the ET UFO truth embargo. And I will speak to what I've been able to do, but I'm not alone here. I started in '96. I founded the Paradigm Research Group, which is the main organization, and it's based at paradigmclock.com on the internet. The first step was to register as a lobbyist for a number of research activist organizations with these interests. And it was a deliberate act, and it was the first time that anyone had ever registered as a lobbyist for these issues. And that was immediately noted by the political press in Washington, D.C., and resulted in some substantial media coverage, including a cover article, a business section front page article in the Washington Post. I'm still a registered lobbyist and still the only one 9 years later. About a year and a half after that, I then founded the Extraterrestrial Phenomena Political Action Committee, XPAC, X-PPAC, which is based at x-ppac.org on the internet. It was the first political action committee ever formed addressing these issues, and it has raised some money over the years, not nearly enough, but it's there. And it has a mission statement, and it talks about the things that can be done. And again, this is part of the normalization process. These are the things that would normally exist for any issue of importance, and the fact that they didn't exist was inappropriate and might lead one to think that, well, there's really no issue here. There's no lobbyist, there's no PAC. I then, continued to do activism of the standard type, lobbying political media, lobbying on the Congress, sending a lot of information out to Washington, the right people. And then the next step was in 2002, I made a decision to try to bring the thing into the congressional race in Maryland, 8th District. This was a calculated move. The goal was to get involved in that particular race because it was a very, very well-covered race. It ended up being the most expensive congressional race of the 2002 election. Connie Morella, a very nice, very competent 8-term Republican, was running against a group of Democrats. Well, there were a group of Democrats in the primary, including Mark Shriver, who was a member of the Kennedy family. And so it was getting a lot of attention. It ended up being a race between Morella and Chris Van Hollen, a very fine Democratic state senator, who won, believe it or not. And my intention was to inject myself and this issue right into that campaign and get attention. But to do it, I had to get on the ballot. Being in the primary is of little consequence. And so I registered as an independent. And a group of volunteers went out in very, very hot, humid conditions the summer of 2002, gathered 5,000 signatures, and we got on the ballot. It was the first time that anyone has been on a congressional Senate ballot in November talking about the extraterrestrial issue, talking about exopolitics. And I was in 4 debates with the candidates, including the big one that was filmed. This was another milestone and another act of normalization. By the way, in 2004, 7 or 8 candidates, these are all primary candidates that had won the primaries in lopsided districts where they couldn't win, discussed this issue a little bit. So that was very gratifying to know that. That was the project in 2002. The next is PRG launched the X Conference. The X Conference, the initial X Conference launched in April of 2004 was a deliberately crafted activist maneuver to bring nearly 30 speakers into town, one of the strongest collections ever, in a conference that was not a UFO conference, but rather an exopolitics conference in which phenomenology was secondary. And every member of Congress was invited or to send their staff. All the political press were hit heavily. To get the message to Washington, D.C., that this issue is not simply out there, it's in your backyard. And 9 PhDs amongst 30 speakers from 5 countries are talking to 700 people right outside the Beltway, all right? And you need to come out and you need to pay attention to this. This will happen again. We will do the same thing again. We will invite the entire Congress, and we're going to continue to send this message, right? The issue isn't going away. The researchers aren't going away. The public is getting more interested. And your refusal to speak to this, to write about this, to act upon this is embarrassing you. It is embarrassing you as a journalist. It is embarrassing you as a member of Congress. You are looking foolish. You are looking either arrogant or displaced or useless or inconclusive or irrelevant. This issue of this magnitude to be off the radar or explicitly not dealt with by the Congress of this country is unacceptable. The X Conference, which is housed at www.x-conference.com on the internet, is designed to send a very clear message to every member of Congress and the member of the elite political media, which is primarily housed in Washington, D.C. And the message is this, that the issue of this ET engagement is not going to go away. They haven't gone away. The researchers aren't going away, and the public's interest is simply growing. They're going to meet in larger and larger groups, including in this town. And they're going to learn more and more while you sit on your backside doing nothing. And increasingly, you're going to look irrelevant, complicit, compromised, and embarrassed. That the deliberative body of the most powerful nation in the world is clueless or refuses to deal with the issue because they're compromised, and that the political media is violating every tenet of journalism, ethical journalism, that it ascribes to by being complicit with this embargo. And so you can make fun of it, and you can laugh, and you can sneer, and you can joke, but this paradigmatic tsunami is going to wash you away unless you get off your butt and address this issue. As a journalist and as a member of Congress, we are tired of your game playing and your kind of vacuousness about matters of great importance. We're tired of you believing that simply getting elected is enough, and that afterwards you should be left alone to get your salary and your perks and your FaceTime on the television shows, but when major issues are needed to be dealt with, you don't want to be bothered. We're tired of you changing your fax number so you can't get information sent to your office. And we're certainly tired of the political journalists standing down on this, particularly the Washington Post. So the X conference, as long as I can continue to hold it, will be designed to punch that message through the Beltway into the core, of the leadership of this country. The management of the extraterrestrial truth embargo is scattered a bit, but I think a good deal of it still is in Washington, D.C. And so they hear these things. I have had meetings in town where people who are pretty well connected have told me flat out that there's an extraterrestrial presence. I've had intelligence officers tell me that. I've had scientists tell me that. Astronauts have said this, some in private, okay? And so you have this ridiculous sort of almost tabloid reality where you can go to a cocktail party and find out there's extraterrestrials engaging the planet, but you can't find it in the Congressional Record or the Washington Post. This is ridiculous. And it makes us look stupid, particularly to other governments like France and England, right, and Mexico and Belgium, and even to some degree Russia, right, who look at this great power, who clearly they've deferred to on this issue, make a fool of itself. And that's the only way you can describe a situation where 90% of your own citizens say you're lying about something, 50% believe something is true and you say it's not, and nothing is done to resolve it. Any other issue had numbers like that, there would be a political firestorm going on. It would be hardball 2020 and the O'Reilly factor 724 on the issue until it was dealt with. But this issue, no. It's in suspended animation, hung above an intellectual ghetto created by the government to contain everybody inside the walls of ridicule so that they can continue to do their thing and not be bothered. That is going to stop. It's going to stop because a movement is about to begin that will end it. It will be the politics of disclosure. It will be an exopolitical movement to get this truth embargo ended. Conferences like the UFO Congress, the X Conference, the Bay Area UFO Conference, the NUFOC Conference, the MUFON and MUFON Symposiums, the Crash Retrieval Conference, and 30 others. The American people will have to engage the politics as I have and others have, and they're going to have to say that we're willing to put $100 million into environmental activism, we're willing to put $40 million into dealing with immigration issues, we're willing to put $10 million into WTO activism, right? How much are we willing to put into ending the truth embargo about the greatest information the human race has ever learned about? So far they've put in basically zero. And another point I'd like to make, since I'm on this camera, is that in the last 25 years, the fine professionals in the entertainment industry have brought in hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars of revenue by movies, by television series and television programs devoted to extraterrestrial phenomena issues. 20 of the top 200 movies grossing of all time deal with extraterrestrial issues. They have all become they've made millions of dollars personally, hundreds of millions for their studios, right? Based on an interest that has been generated by 5 decades of work by people who basically spent themselves into penury, destroyed their lives to get this information out through an activist citizen science activism. And these entertainment professionals in Hollywood have put nothing back into the political resolution, nothing back into it. All right? That is absolutely unacceptable. And they're going to have to answer for that. They need to do what Elizabeth Taylor did in the early 80s when she said, enough of this nonsense. This idea that AIDS is some non-mainstream, unimportant disease that just involves some gays, which we don't like, is asinine. Here's $1 million, here's $2 million, and the flood of money came in. Hollywood must do the same with this issue. It's bad enough they're not doing something in general, but for them to make billions of dollars from the subject matter and give no money to the people that are slaving away to get the truth to the people is simply not right. And history will be brutal about that.